Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing fantastic. Okay, we're digging into again Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He's a figure you cannot really escape, and I always encourage you to read the books themselves, then give your opinion, and do not accept the opinion of anybody who has not read not even one of his books front to back. The reason for this is a lot of people hear things, repeat it, and then say, "Oh yeah, I've read it," and it's like, "You read the whole thing?" Like they lie. They just lie about how much they've actually read or comprehended because it gives them more clout and prestige. So I always encourage people, don't talk about a class you never took. Never talk about a scholar you never read. Never slander a book you never read. And only speak when you actually have first-hand experience with a text or something that gives you more credibility. Okay? So, by digging into his work ourselves on this channel, we can have a more encompassing understanding of what it is that he's getting at, his unique writing style, and it prompts us to think. Does not mean you adopt it and braid it into your life and blah 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 blah. No. A smart person can understand when you read something and you leave it at that, and then you argue with it, you comprehend it, you do textual analysis, right? You digest it, and then you give your opinion. But if you just scan it and, oh, so-and-so said this, well, you didn't really learn nothing. And you shouldn't speak as an authority. Because if you didn't have the patience to read the book, why are you so quick to open your mouth? So, that's that. Now, go ahead and listen to this as you water your garden. You got your headphones in. You're washing the dishes, cleaning the bathroom. Whatever it is you're doing on your day. Now, this section is on the pill criminal. Sounds kind of weird, but let's get into it. You do not want to kill, O judges and sacrificers, until the animal has nodded. Now that's interesting. The judge and the sacrifice until has nodded. Nodded in acceptance of this fate, maybe? Behold, the pale criminal has nodded. Out of his eyes speak the great contempt. My ego is something that shall be overcome. My ego is, to me, the great contempt of man. That is what his eyes say. That he judged himself, that he was his highest moment. Do not let the sublime return to his baseness. There is no redemption for one who suffers so of himself, except a quick death. That he judged himself, highest moment, sublime return to his baseness. Now, there's two forms of sublime. An overwhelming numerical volume of something that is coming at you that's just like, whoa, and there's the threat of danger behind it. And then there's the cliche natural language sublime, which is something that gives you an euphoric feeling. So, sublime return to his baseness sounds like he's using the second definition, where someone is reveling in their debauchery. There is no redemption for one who suffers so of himself except a quick death. Your killing, O judges, shall be pity and not revenge. So a pity killing versus a revenge killing, that has a different essence to it. Revenge has more of a hatred, whereas with pity, it's more of like putting something out of its misery, right? Where you feel like they're harming themselves more by living, and so you do a mercy kill, they call it. And as you kill, be sure that you yourselves justify life. It is not enough to make your peace with the man you kill. Your sadness shall be love of the overmen. Notice this. Your sadness shall be the love of the overmen. sadness, and love. It's a very interesting combo there for us. Thus you shall justify your living on. So the justification for living on is that you love the overman, regardless of if it makes you sad. Enemy, you shall say, but not villain. Sick, you shall say, but not scoundrel. Fool, you shall say, but not sinner. Now let's look at these here. Let's break this down. Enemy, but not villain. What's the difference between a villain and an enemy? Every villain is an enemy, but not every enemy is a villain. A villain is somebody who truly is beyond usually redemption, and you must use different measures in order to defeat that villain, and a peace treaty is usually not as easy to get with a villain, right? Just think about, let's say, Voldemort in Harry Potter. Commodus in Gladiator. Saruman in Lord of the Rings. When you have a villain, it's like that person is bent upon really getting their order into place. Whereas an enemy in warfare can become a friend tomorrow if you get a certain type of peace treaty, you come to a political arrangement, you make a deal, you put the war in the past, now they're a vassal to your empire or to your agenda, and now serve your philosophy, right? Now, sick, you shall say, but not scoundrel. So sick is someone who can be cured, whereas a scoundrel is more of like a ethical defect in behavior, which is something that has a more permanent essence to it. Fool, you shall say, but not sinner. So fool is more of like the light-hearted, stupid moron, like you fool, you idiot. And then there's sinner, which has the Christian tone, right? Because he's taking jabs at Christians here. So he wants to not use Christian language. Very interesting. And you, red judge, if you were to tell out loud all that you have already done in thought, everyone would cry, away with this filth and this poisonous worm. So what is he getting at here? If you were to tell out loud all that you have already done in thought, so that if this judge, who is looking upon the criminal with contempt, were to actually confess his own wrongdoings, thoughts, and such, the people would actually turn a revulsion on him, and they would demand he leave. So he's pointing out some type of hypocrisy, and to say poisonous worm, it's pretty strong language, because if you got a poisonous worm in your body, you want that out immediately. Like the visceral disgust you would feel if a doctor told you had parasites, or that even your favorite dog had heartworms. If you look at a picture of what it looks like when a dog gets heartworms, if you don't give them their medication, it looks like spaghetti, and it makes you not want to eat noodles. So don't look at that picture before dinner, but it makes you itch. It's like a horrible feeling. So him using that type of potent language is intentional. But thought is one thing, the deed is another, and the image of the deed still another. The wheel of causality does not roll between them. So what is he saying here? Right? The wheel of causality. So a thought doesn't necessarily cause the other, and one can do something without having a forethought. That kind of gets into criminology there. Premeditation versus impulsivity, right? An image made this pale man pale. So you get it? An image that literally saps the color from your face and makes you shocked and horror. Hopefully none of us have to go through that. But in our lives, there might come an opportunity where we stumble upon something so horrendous that it actually shocks us and makes us take a step back and think, wow. He was equal to his deed, and when he did it, but he could not bear its image after it was done. Now, notice this. He was equal to his deed when he did it, but he could not bear its image after it was done. So the images, the memory, repeating in his mind, was quite intense. Now, if you ever read Shakespeare's Macbeth, his wife, Lady Macbeth, she has a scene where she's washing her hands, and the blood is not there of the king she helped execute. And she keeps saying, "These hands will never be clean." And she still sees the blood, even though it's not there. And she goes into madness. So, lots of people will talk about, PTSD from war and what they have seen. And that when the deed is done, it can't be undone. And you will be haunted with that image for quite some time. So you gotta think before you do things. Now he always saw himself as the doer of one deed. Madness I call this. The exception now became the essence for him. Notice this. The exception became the essence. The exception. You always gotta watch out for the exception. Because some will make the exception the rule, but there are rooms for loophole exceptions. That's what makes law very tricky. A chalk streak stops a hen. The stroke that he himself struck stopped his poor reason. Madness after the deed I call this. And he highlighted he italicized after the deed. Madness after the deed. Which goes about what I was just saying about Lady Macbeth in that story of Shakespeare, where she was pushing Macbeth to do this horrible deed. She did witchcraft, and she was a terrible, scary villain in my view. And after, she became mad because of what she did. So, someone can think that there will be no side effect for their deed, but there will be. So one has to keep that in perspective. Listen, O judges, there is yet another madness, and that comes before the deed. So notice this. We have madness before and after. Alas, you have not yet crept deep enough into this soul. Thus speaks the red judge. Why did this criminal murder? He wanted to rob, but I say unto you, his soul wanted blood, not robbery. He thirsted after the bliss of the knife. Now that is interesting. So you're getting into another criminology aspect here. He has a fetishization and desire to see a very violent act. It wasn't exactly because he was desperate for something monetary, right? In law, that's where the premeditation comes in. Did you do this? And then acts of desperation are different than acts of malicious intent, right? It's quite interesting. And this language he uses of thirsted after the bliss of the knife. So he uses the word bliss. A knife is going to get you the blood, and then he's highlighting how this criminal he enjoyed his rampage, his stabbing rampage. His poor reason, however, did not comprehend this madness and persuaded him. What matters blood, it asked. Don't you want at least to commit a robbery with it, to take revenge? And he listened to his poor reason. Its speech lay upon him like lead. Notice this. Its speech lay upon him like lead. Lead is poisonous, makes you delirious. I think it was Beethoven, the composer, who used to go sit in this hot water. I don't know, it's not a sauna, not a jacuzzi. They didn't have jacuzzis, but it was some type of natural water that was warm. Hot springs, maybe. It had a high amount of lead, and then they said it slowly made him crazy. So lead is very, very unhealthy for humans and makes you go crazy. So when he says speech lay upon him like lead, speech that was as poisonous as lead to your human mind, and we all know how certain speeches, rhetoric, can drive people to a poisonous conclusion and behavior pattern. So it's a very cool, unique way of condensing that huge concept into a few words. So he robbed when he murdered. He did not want to be ashamed of his madness. He did not want to be ashamed of his madness. We have a lot of that in society today, where actually musicians glorify such madness and rampages upon their enemies. And then they rap about how they enjoy doing that. Or they do a guitar solo on some strange ramblings of their delirium. So he's gotten at a lot of interesting angles here, because he's highlighting for you the criminal's mindset and the hypocrisy of the red judge. I find this to be very interesting. What do you think? And then he talks about how you view someone if they're your opponent. Very unique writer, must say. He has his ways of going about getting these concepts into you in a way that you understand, in a way that you actually have to think upon. And it's always fun to think.